Madame, Monsieur, bonjour.
Hello there. In 1979, Formula One provided us with an exceptional championship. Motors TV would like to relive it with you. 20 years ago, 4 teams fought it out for the world title. Ferrari, Williams, and 2 French teams. Ligier, who made the whole of France quiver with excitement, and Renault, in whose car a turbo engine was to triumph for the first time. In 1979, 7 drivers won Grand Prix. 3 of them were Jacques Laffite, Patrick Depailler, and Jean-Pierre Jabouille. A 4th went down in motor racing history as the result of a famous duel. Using film from the archives and recent interviews, Motors TV presents the 1979 season. We're at Monaco, 7th round of the World Championship. The 2 Ligiers take us on a lap with their onboard cameras. We're almost halfway through the season. Until now, only 2 constructors have won Grand Prix, Ferrari with 4 and Ligier with 3. The other teams are a long way behind. Yet there are big differences between these 2 teams. One is a legendary machine with a wealth of experience, the other a small French company with only 1 previous victory to its name in 1977. Ligier had been set up in 1975, with many of its technicians coming from the French company Matra. But in 1978, Matra announced that it would not be able to provide engines for Ligier the following season. That presented the team with a quandary. With its new car, therefore, Ligier had to look elsewhere, and found the Ford Cosworth engine for its JS11. Much to many people's surprise, the engine was an absolute cracker. This epic season had started many months before, in South America. A far cry from the glamour of Monaco. At that very first race of the season, Jacques Laffite found himself named the Conquistador.
C'est le rêve. Pole position, bon départ.
It's a dream. Pole position, a good start, the race win. I'm delighted. But it came to an end at the Spanish Grand Prix, which was only the first in Europe. The euphoria hadn't lasted long. In South America, Laffite and Depailler, the new arrival on the team, had the same status. But the atmosphere was not as relaxed as it had seemed. Patrick Depailler's arrival was seen by Laffite as a challenge. Until then, he had ruled the roost at Ligier, but now he was going to have to share. He had the reputation of being a driver with panache, but a poor technician. Depailler was rather the opposite. Guy Ligier, by employing Depailler, intended to increase the chance of success for his team. In fact, he risked internal tensions. However, in Argentina, at the first Grand Prix of the season, the proof of the pudding, as they say, was in the eating. the Ligiers occupied the front row of the grid after tough qualifying sessions. Depailler would start in second place, Laffite starting once again from pole position. Laffite, naturally, was delighted.
Jacques, comment ça se passe, une pole position?
How does it feel to be in pole position? I'm thrilled. It's my second. I'd already had one in Monza back in 1976. It's almost a race won. True, but when the flag drops, it's Depailler who makes the better start from this historic front row for French motorsport. Laffite, however, soon eases past into the lead. At the end of the race, Depailler had to cede to Carlos Reutemann and John Watson, finishing only fourth. But it was an easy victory for Laffite, who, of course, went on to lead the World Championship. At Sao Paulo for the Brazilian Grand Prix, another front row for Ligier. But this time, throughout the race, Depailler was to follow Laffite like a shadow. Although Depailler let the pressure off a bit towards the end of the race, it was nevertheless a triumphant 1-2 result for the Ligier team, continuing their tremendous form at the beginning of this momentous season. Success in far-off lands, naturally, attracted a great deal of attention back home.
On est rentré en France, ça fait beaucoup
We returned to France and everyone was talking and writing about it. For me, it was the start of a lot of things in French car racing. It became very popular in France at that time. The television, the radio, everyone was talking about it. They discovered that there was this blue French team. It made an enormous boom, and that helped Renault and others. We can thank the Ligier team and Guy Ligier to have allowed drivers like me. Our careers just exploded. The best part, in fact, was that Ligier was not alone. After its debut on the Grand Prix scene 2 years earlier, the Renault team was also increasing in influence. Now, with a new second driver, René Arnoux, joining Jean-Pierre Jabouille, who'd done all the testing since the start of the project. At the third Grand Prix of the season in South Africa, Jabouille took Renault's first pole, although the circuit altitude had a lot to do with it. Everyone knows that it is at altitude and that as a result atmospheric engines lose power because the density of the air is less, and we were able to overcome that. There were of course other parameters, but we had a bit more power, and the circuit at Kyalami at the time did not penalise turbos.
Était quelque chose où le temps de réponse ne pénalisait pas trop les turbos.
At the start, Jabouille fights it out with the two Ferraris of Jody Scheckter and Gilles Villeneuve. Meanwhile, storm clouds are gathering over Kyalami. By the third lap, the circuit is waterlogged. This results in the race being interrupted and a 50-minute delay before a restart. It has become clear by then that Renault's advantage with the turbo at altitude had been completely annihilated by the weather. The two Ferraris go into the lead, and the funeral mass is spoken for Renault's first win. Scheckter, at home of course, and Villeneuve use the qualities of their car to their best advantage. This Grand Prix was the first appearance of the Ferrari 312 T4, of course one of the very first ground effect cars. The speed of this new weapon, designed by Margot Forieri, sent a serious warning to all those hoping to win the world title. And the first of those was Ligier. Nothing seems to be going right anymore for the blue team. Depailler comes off on the fifth lap, followed by Laffite shortly after halfway through the race, only much more violently. So the way was left open for Gilles Villeneuve to achieve his second Grand Prix win. Jean-Pierre Jarier at the wheel of a well-balanced Tyrrell was third, and neither of the Renaults finished because of valve spring failure for Jabouille and a puncture for Arnoux. A month later, it was the Grand Prix of the USA West at Long Beach, the American Monaco. For Ligier, their problems continued. Even the boss tried his hand to sort things out. The two cars have a problem that nobody can explain. In fact, it was a problem with the aerodynamics. So the Ligiers were dominated by Ferrari in qualifying, but Renault was in even worse trouble withdrawing their cars the day before the race. We were breaking transmissions because of the circuit and the power of the engine. The power came in all at once on the road circuit. Jean-Pierre came off very hard in qualifying. He hit the wall on the left, on the right, and he broke another transmission on Saturday morning. From Renault, they decided not to run the cars in the interest of safety. So disappointment, but it's true. The risk was enormous.
Mais en même temps, c'est vrai qu'il y avait un risque qui était énorme. Parce qu'une transmission cassée, ça peut avoir des grosses conséquences en sortie de route.
So this was to be the Gilles Villeneuve Festival. Pole position, alone at the front, fastest lap. The Quebec Canadian won them all. And, like Laffite, now had 2 wins in the early part of the season. Ligier didn't wake up until the end of April. Laffite and Depailler shared the front row at Jarama for the first European Grand Prix. With the best start, Depailler was in a position of strength and able to control the situation. It marked the much hoped-for return of Ligier to the front. But sadly, it was also a sort of swan song. Laffite, menacing for some time, over-revved, and that eliminated him from the race. For Patrick Depailler, a year after his first victory in the Monaco Grand Prix for Tyrrell, the success was a form of rite of passage. He had already proved that he could dominate his teammates regularly. Now he proved that he too could make the JS11 win. And, even more important, he was now leading the World Championship. But this victory, although nobody knew it at the time, would be the last for the year for the blue cars from Ligier. In Belgium at Zolder, Laffite is continually trying to find the correct adjustment. He and Depailler still find themselves on the front row once again, but the competition is getting stronger and stronger. Depailler gets the best start, with Laffite at his heels. But Alan Jones in the new Williams, called the FW07, was lying in wait. The surprise came a couple of laps later. Laffite took the lead, but that wasn't the end. Jones then took his turn at the lead, with behind him a tremendous battle between the two Ligiers, Laffite-Depailler, Depailler-Laffite. The battle was terrible, almost fratricidal. Whatever happened, Depailler came off the circuit during the 47th lap and injured his right wrist. Since Jones was no longer there either, Laffite took over the lead. But soon Scheckter was beginning to menace. The South African set off after the Frenchman and got everyone on his side in this Grand Prix that made great viewing for the 75,000 spectators. It was Scheckter's first victory for Ferrari, and what's more, he was now leading the championship. At Monaco, Scheckter claimed a second win. The South African, with no doubt whatsoever, had found his feet at Ferrari and made his mark. Now it was Villeneuve doing all he could to try and remain in contact. The Ferraris were majestic and let no one else interfere in their own fight for victory. In front of a crowd, including Johnny Halliday, it was the fourth red win in the making. In the end, Villeneuve broke down with a differential problem. No Ligiers finished, Depailler had broken his engine, and Laffite his gearbox. In the same way as there had been between Brazil and South Africa, there was now a gap of a month after the cancellation of the Swedish Grand Prix. The first half of the championship was over. Only the 4 best results in each half season would count. Scheckter has 30 points, 6 in front of Laffite and 10 in front of Villeneuve, Depailler and Reutemann. Depailler, however, would go no further, badly injured in a delta-planing accident. A cruel, cruel blow for the whole Ligier team. Despite their fierce rivalry, there's no doubt that the duo had driven Ligier's progress on. With Depailler no longer there, the whole team lost its momentum. It was an accident for which the driver from Clermont-Ferrand was to be reproached for a long, long time, critics not hesitating to condemn what they saw as lack of professionalism.
At
the time, I was disappointed. Firstly, for Patrick, because it was pretty serious. I thought that it was completely idiotic on his part, in the middle of the season, to take up delta planing. I think that you can ride a motorbike, you can ski. I've skied since I was 17 or 18, and at the time I knew the risks. I knew my capabilities and my weaknesses. Patrick, for example, knew motorbikes well. He was used to them. Deltaplaning was something new for him. Everyone knew the stupidity of what he'd done. He had wanted to rest, which was why he went. But we rarely spoke after his accident. It was a pity. It was dramatic even for Patrick. Even so, I still say that I have the right to kill myself doing something other than Formula One. Patrick Depailler was replaced by Jackie Ickx, but the heart had gone out of the team. Pontoons, problems with aerodynamics, everything was coming together. The handicaps were simply becoming too great for the team to bear. We had gained confidence. We were content. We'd been in Formula One for 3 years. It was the 4th year. The team was united, solid, competent. But we didn't react fast enough or well enough. And the championship got away when it should have been ours. If the car had kept its aluminium pontoons, we could have been world champions. But that's the way it is. On board with Jean-Pierre Jabouille, braking for the slowest corner on the course from 280 kilometers an hour after a long period of acceleration. Left and then right, and we brake for the sloping left. Difficult because the car tends to run away to the outside of the circuit. Up into 4th gear, hard on the brakes once again, down to 2nd, into this right-hander at about 150 kilometers an hour. Then we accelerate strongly away, up 3rd, 4th gear, brake once again, down to 3rd, and through this double apex left-hander, quite an easy corner. Then back, up into 4th gear once again, on through the sloping right-hander, again running away a little to the outside, and then this vital corner which lines you up for the straight. In 4th, perhaps 5th gear, depending on the car. Very, very fast indeed. Then a slight dip, back into 6th for the straight, and I do a time of about 1 minute and 9 seconds. Well, in fact, it's a bit less. Neither Arnoux nor Jabouille, who's just treated us to that lap of Dijon-Prenois, host of the French Grand Prix, or team director Gérard Delourse, or for that matter any member of the Renault team, knew that this Grand Prix was going to be their race, one which would be remembered with emotion for many years to come. But before that, of course, there was the worry of potential failure in front of the home crowd.
Ça, c'est clair que chez Renault,
it's obvious that Renault did everything to put pressure on the two drivers. It felt as though it wasn't the French Grand Prix, but the end of the world. We had to be strong. I mean, luckily in that respect, I've always been pretty relaxed. The people at Renault were rather overexcited.
En espérant gagner le Grand Prix, c'est le Grand Prix de France et que Renault fait... heureusement, moi j'ai jamais, de ce côté-là, j'ai toujours été assez relax. Donc, bon, ça m'a pas fait grand-chose de plus, mais c'est vrai que les gens chez Renault, ils étaient assez fébriles.
Both on the front row of the grid with their mission already partially achieved, the Renault RS10s with their double turbos made a superb start. However, it was Gilles Villeneuve who got the best, rocketing past them into the lead. Jabouille, however, did not fight back initially. He wasn't too worried. He was attempting to preserve his tyres. Arnoux, though, obviously missed his start and was stuck right in the middle of the pack, only 8th at the end of the first lap. Jabouille follows Villeneuve like a shadow. At the front, the Canadians simply can't get rid of the Frenchman. Arnoux starts to climb back. It's obvious that this 8th Grand Prix of the season is going to be a struggle between the Ferraris and the Renaults. After the first third of the race, Villeneuve is still in the lead, in front of Jabouille, who is holding on, Scheckter, Piquet, Jarier, Lauda and Arnoux. In the crowd, the Ligier supporters remain silent, as the blue cars cannot fight against the reds and the yellows. Arnoux got past Scheckter and up into 3rd place. The great Renault offensive can now begin. Halfway through the race, or round about the 40th lap, Villeneuve does his best to increase the rhythm, to up the pace. Jabouille is still biding his time, while Arnoux has come much, much closer. Jabouille takes the lead and Arnoux opens the gap on Scheckter. For Jabouille, a happy ending is on the cards. The Frenchman sets his own pace. Villeneuve has to let go. Nelson Piquet comes off in a spectacular accident, although not a particularly serious one. It would take more than that to worry Jabouille, who continues his steady progress. Behind him, Villeneuve is hanging on, but he can see Arnoux right on top of him. One of the best duels ever in Formula One history thrills the crowd. Arnoux against Villeneuve, Villeneuve against Arnoux, a fight for 2nd place, snapping at one another's heels, swapping places, corner after corner, lap after lap, a fight for honour, an historic battle which was and always will be savoured, not only by the people who were there, but the many who watch it time and time again in clips like this. Spare a thought for Jean-Pierre Jabouille. Although he won this race, fate dictated that this fantastic battle between Villeneuve and Arnoux meant the crowds hardly even looked at him, even as race winner. All eyes were on the tremendous battle being fought behind him. Although Arnoux was often ahead of Villeneuve, they even bashed wheels once or twice. Villeneuve it would be who ended up reaching the checkered flag just fractionally ahead. Villeneuve it was, the French-Canadian, who by 24 1/1000ths of a second was to finish 2nd after this tremendous battle, with Jabouille the winner. Despite the regular contact, it was a battle between equals and a battle more than that, between friends. I don't think it could have happened except between Gilles and me. We had the same desire to win, the same motivation, the same rage. We knew each other very well. Of course, we were very, very good friends too. It's true that it was close sometimes, but we knew each other. Neither of us would deliberately hurt the other. We linked wheels, we touched one another. At one moment he hit me hard and I went over the curbing. I got back on the circuit, but we had 2 more goes in the downhill left. A marvellous duel. It remains in all the films about Formula One. Something really powerful with someone who I liked immensely. A French Grand Prix that no one will forget. Formula One changed eras in one go, at all levels. The battle between Arnoux and Villeneuve, the first win for Jabouille, the first win for Renault, the first win for a turbo engine. From that moment right up to the podium, the atmosphere was almost surreal at Dijon.
Les gens même étaient un petit peu hébétés, quoi.
Everyone was rather dazed. Everyone had hoped for it, but there had been so much destruction and trouble and worry that everyone was happy, perhaps even surprised. I wasn't going to explode with joy because I had won a race. I knew that I was capable of winning Grand Prix.
Donc, non, j'étais très satisfait, mais je le savais. Je savais que ça allait arriver un jour. Je savais que moi, je m'étais rendu compte depuis le temps que je courais que j'étais capable.
Like a soldier going to war, there are trials. One trains.
C'est comme le mec qui va.
I never had shaky legs at the start of a Grand Prix.
À tout ça, c'est que bon, quand on fait des essais, on fait des courses, on a un entraînement et puis voilà. Et alors on est la pression, c'est pareil. Il y a des gens qui vous la collent, qui essayent de vous la coller, qui l'ont à côté de vous, et puis ils sont même surpris que vous, ça va, quoi. J'avais pas les jambes qui tremblaient lors du départ du Grand Prix, quoi.
Saturday, July the 14th, 1979. On this Bastille Day, anyone would have thought that Renault would simply capitalise on its Formula One revolution. In the follow-up to the French Grand Prix, the men at Renault had seemed euphoric. Well, Jabouille is on the front row once again, beaten only by Alan Jones's surprising Williams, which had claimed its first pole position. A Jabouille full of confidence, who 13 days earlier had harvested the fruits of his exemplary self-denial and his unshakable faith in Renault. The Silverstone circuit in England. At the start, because of the famous response time, or lack of it, of the turbo, it was no surprise to see Jabouille allow the Williamses of Jones and Regazzoni to lead away. But before long, Jabouille was through into second place. Alan Jones, Jean-Pierre Jabouille, the duel was on. Behind them, a gap. The Ferraris are not really at the party. Unfortunately for Jabouille, hope lasts only 20 laps. A valve spring failure spells the end for the Frenchman, the first of a long series of misfortunes for the unfortunate Jean-Pierre. Jones, as a result, has it all his own way. For this British Grand Prix, the FW07, which had been launched 3 months earlier, had been further improved. But it was not to be Jones's day, his engine exploding on the 39th lap, so Clay Regazzoni took the race. The summer, however, was going to be a very, very good one for Alan Jones. The Australian would gain 3 consecutive victories in Germany, Austria and Holland. Regazzoni was going to be following it in his wheel tracks as far as Williams were concerned. At the German Grand Prix, only Jabouille seemed to threaten Alan Jones. The Frenchman had been fastest in qualifying, but the heat was to suffocate the turbo engine. Throughout the early part of the race, Jabouille took many risks. But it was all to come to naught, as he was to retire on the 8th lap. Jones, therefore, no longer had a rival. Laffite, Regazzoni, Scheckter were all a long way off. So, despite a few mechanical worries towards the end of the race, the advantage he had built up early on was good enough for Jones, and the Williams was to score a significant double victory. And so on to Austria, for another demonstration of just how good a Williams FW07 could be. Here, Jones had to tame Gilles Villeneuve. Not an easy task, as anyone who raced against him would testify. The secret of the Williams was its simple and classic concept. The opposite of the technological monsters represented by Ferrari and Renault. The Williams were the lightest, the Williams were aerodynamically the best, and the Williams had the maximum ground effect. Arnoux, who'd taken pole position, had his eyes on second place in Austria, but had to retire with a fuel delivery problem. As a result, the familiar number 27, that of Alan Jones, went on to his second consecutive victory, making it a hat-trick for Williams. In Holland, it was all a bit fairer. Villeneuve proved to be a formidable adversary, although poor Riccardo Patrese had a quite ghastly accident. Villeneuve was leading at the beginning of the Grand Prix, running ahead of Jones and the Renault of Jabouille. In the process, however, Villeneuve had worked his tyres too hard, and they simply wouldn't survive. Jones dragged himself ever closer to Villeneuve, perhaps even aware of the problems that the French-Canadian was experiencing. The famous shot of Villeneuve completing nearly an entire lap of the circuit on just 3 wheels will be something that sticks in Alan Jones's mind. So Jones claimed his 3rd consecutive victory. One which he was not able to celebrate quite as he would have wished, as the team's Arab sponsor forbade him to open his champagne on the podium. A bottle of orange had to suffice. So the day before the Italian Grand Prix, the situation was as follows. 2 wins for Laffite at the start of the season, then 2 for Villeneuve, 1 for Depailler, absent of course now, 2 for Scheckter, who we see here in the midst of his preparations for Monza, 1 each for Jabouille and Regazzoni, and now a hat-trick for Alan Jones. Scheckter leads the World Championship and has become favourite for the title. But Villeneuve, Jones and Laffite still have, mathematically at least, some hope that Scheckter might make a mistake and they could take over at the top of the title chase. An unlikely prospect, however, given just how efficient Scheckter had been, finishing in the points 10 times in the preceding 11 Grand Prix. An exceptional performance by anyone's standards. As far as the blue cars were concerned, as we've already said, a minimal chance remained, but they didn't harbour any illusions. In any case, the general atmosphere in the paddock at Monza was electric. In qualifying, Jabouille took his 4th pole of the year, but the 150,000 spectators only had eyes for Ferrari. But at the sharp end of the grid, the colour wasn't so much red as yellow. The Monza spectators, as ever, occupying places perhaps they shouldn't. As always, or very nearly so, Renault made a bad start. Scheckter dived through into the lead. That had the crowds cheering, but despite that, Arnoux came back to lead. He headed the 2 Ferraris for a few laps, but an engine failure resulted in his retirement. Right up until the middle of the race, the first 3 then hold station: Scheckter, Villeneuve and Laffite. Little by little, though, the Ferraris increased their lead. Scheckter has the title almost in his grasp, and Laffite eventually has to give best. So for Ferrari, it turned into a complete triumph at Monza in their home country. Ferrari, the Constructors' Champion, and Scheckter, the Drivers' Champion. The most consistent and, since the beginning of a very tough season, proving to be the best. A great result at home.
Oh, mais j'ai jamais espéré être champion du monde, hein, je dois le préciser.
I never expected to be world champion.
On gagne, on est là.
If I was, so much the better. Terrific. If I wasn't, well, it didn't matter. I was only 36. I was young. It didn't bother me. Our incompetence was more serious. You can always say, if... The world champions, constructors and drivers were thus decided. However, there were still 2 Grand Prix to be fought out in this 1979 season. The first of them, the Canadian Grand Prix, which took place for the 2nd consecutive year on the circuit Ile de Notre Dame. As early as qualifying, there was more drama, this time concerning Brabham. At the wheel of the number 5 car, Riccardo Zannino was the surprise driver rather than Niki Lauda. And for good reason. The Austrian had just announced his retirement. The double world champion in 1975 and 1977 had decided on the morning of the first practice. "My heart is no longer in racing," he said soberly and sadly. So one of the most legendary figures in the paddock was leaving, and everyone was in a state of agitation. 3 years later, of course, Lauda was to return. In the Grand Prix itself, interest focused on the duel between Gilles Villeneuve and Alan Jones. The Quebec Canadian on home ground had the best start, despite Jones's pole position. For 50 laps, the red Ferrari and the white Williams didn't let up, providing a superb spectacle for a packed crowd. Villeneuve held the upper hand for most of the time. But the Australian, winner already of 3 Grand Prix, wasn't going to give up easily, and in a tremendous move, a direct attack, he shot through like a cannon into the lead. A superb manoeuvre from the Australian, full of panache, and for Villeneuve, the hope of winning for a second time in a row was gone. For Jones, on the other hand, he had the satisfaction of gaining a 4th victory this year and becoming the driver with the greatest number of wins in 1979. Alan Jones, a rather enigmatic driver, born into a rich Melbourne family with Irish mother and Welsh father, a man of great character. He had been the revelation of the year. In tandem with the FW07 Williams, that it was as good as it was efficient, he simply worked wonders. From then on, it was assumed that the favourite for the 1980 World Championship had become a cert. Jones had laid his claim to future glory. The last meeting of the year was at Watkins Glen, the USA East Grand Prix, on the first weekend of October. There was an odd atmosphere around the 5-kilometre circuit. A few gangs were causing upsets, and rain, which fell intermittently, did nothing to help. But away from the traumas of the campsite and the unpleasantness of some of the spectator areas, the action on the track was once again as good as ever. At the start, Jones and Villeneuve were at it hammer and tongs once again. Somehow, almost like an acrobat, Villeneuve snatches the lead. Struggling for grip on the soaking wet circuit, this was going to be a race to savour. Perhaps by way of preservation, Alan Jones decides to let Gilles Villeneuve go. As the race develops, so too does a drying line on the circuit, although only the width of the fat tyres of the Formula One cars. As the track dried, however, and pit stops had been required, a rear wheel fitted badly resulted in the retirement of Alan Jones. Villeneuve went on to win. René Arnoux for Renault was a brilliant second. Villeneuve climbing to second place in the championship as a result of his second victory. For the first time in 1979, the new world champion Jody Scheckter failed to finish because of a simple puncture when he was lying in second place. Some idea of the merit of the South African. At just 29 years old, Scheckter knew how to use all his knowledge in a race. Consistent, efficient, and with great endurance, sometimes capable of attack, often calculating. He didn't steal his crown, even if others were sometimes more brilliant than he was. At the wheel of the superb 312 T4, the code name of the Ferrari, Scheckter did not let his chance slip by, while Villeneuve had let slip a few precious occasions. Having driven for McLaren in 72 and 73, Tyrrell from 74 to 6, and finally for Wolff in 78 and 79, Scheckter found the organisation and the means which suited him at Ferrari. Yes, he had to fight everyone, Ligier, the Renaults and the Williams, but he had the last word. It was 20 years ago, however, incredible it may seem, Jody Scheckter is still the last Ferrari Formula One world champion. At the end of an historic season, he had 51 points, 4 ahead of teammate Villeneuve. Jones was third on 40, Lafitte fourth, Arnoux eighth, and Jabouille scoring only 9 points for that one victory at Dijon. I always got to the end of the season saying, look, that's the end. The time always goes so fast, especially when you're involved with your passion. There's always something going on, dealing with the team, talking to engineers. It's perpetual. Every year in my Formula One career just flew past.
La vraie histoire, c'est qu'on n'a pas bien travaillé, quoi.
The real story is that we didn't work very well.
Très bonne voiture.
We had a good car,
Certainement aussi par
but a lack of money.
J'aime pas dire par manque d'argent.
We could not rival Ferrari and Williams.
On n'avait pas d'argent à l'époque.
We were never rich,
Pour rivaliser
but
avec les
Guy Ligier gave everything he had.
beaucoup moins d'argent. Et donc, on pouvait pas faire tous les essais qu'on avait envie.
Sadly, even
Ça a
that
été longtemps le cas pour
simply
pour
wasn't
Piquet,
enough.
quoi qu'on ait dit les médias, mais ceux-là, je peux leur dire que la vérité, c'est celle-là, c'est qu'on n'a jamais été très très riche, que Guy a donné toujours tout ce qu'il avait, feu vert et signé les chèques pour faire progresser les voitures, puis à un moment donné de la saison, il n'y avait plus d'argent, il fallait faire attention. Donc on est un peu tombé aussi dans ce piège-là à l'époque.
Quand je pense à tout ça, effectivement, quand j'en reparle, j'ai des...
When I talk about all that, even 20 years ago, I have perfect recollection.
J'ai l'impression forcément que c'est hier.
I have the impression that it was just yesterday.
Un mec qui a 20 ans aujourd'hui...
At the same time, I must be going a bit gaga.
Voilà. Mais par contre,
I'm still working in motorsport, and I realize that time goes very fast, but that nothing has really changed. The only thing, perhaps, is the electronics, but otherwise, everything is the same.
Mais les choses sont exactement les mêmes.
I would consider, in my opinion, that it